Well, I think it's a bit early to say really how Tehran's going to interpret this action, but certainly the US has done what it said it would do. It had said for days that in the face of any Iranian attack on Israel, it would defend its ally, and that's exactly what's happened. We know in the last few days that the US has moved its forces into position to be in a defensive line so that it could help with exactly this type of attack. And in fact, it shot down a number of drones over Syria, so not in fact over Israeli or other territory, but over Syria, to stop them from reaching Israel. Jordan also did the same. It shot down a number of drones that were flying over Jordanian territory as well. And it seems that it's had, the effect that was desired. Ultimately, Israel coming out and saying that most of these drones were stopped before they actually made it onto their targets and into Israel. So that has been something that the US had said it would do and then did, on the other hand. You know, we've got a number of US forces in the region already. They, along with the UK, have actually been involved in pushing back Houthi militants in Yemen. Those are thought to be Iran aligned as well. And those in particular attacks were on commercial ships. There's been another incident on Saturday in which Iranian special forces actually took over a commercial ship, a cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz, so not far away from that region as well. So yes, the US has been part of a reaction to this attack, but we'll have to wait and see how Tehran interprets that.
Well, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has warned that any support for participation in actions against Iran's interests will be met with a decisive response. What does this warning mean for the US?
Well, certainly at the moment, Iran's ambassador to the United Nations has said that this is the end of this attack. But it waits to see, and it reserves the right to respond again if Israel makes, quote, another mistake. It's also warned the US against making any moves and being part of any future missions, certainly from Israel. So I think for the moment, we've had the US doing what it said it would do in defending Israel. Certainly, US President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had a call just recently that they've now concluded, in which they're likely to have talked about what has happened, how bad the damage has been to Israel, and what could happen next. If there is likely to be any further Israeli retaliation, some suggestion from officials that there would be. But the US in the past has said, for instance, that it wasn't involved in Israel's attack on the Damascus Iranian compound, that it didn't even know, in fact, that that was going to happen until it was already underway, and that's when Israel informed them. But some speculation in Washington that the US has said to Israel, and that Biden is likely to have talked to Netanyahu on the phone, about needing to have any warning if Israel does plan to move any further.
Well, as you mentioned, US President Joe Biden has spoken with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So what more details can you tell us about that?
So we're still waiting for a full readout from this call, and that's likely to come in the next few hours. But certainly we know that relations have actually become quite strained between Biden and Netanyahu in the last few days and weeks. Right back in October, when the Hamas attack on Israel happened, the US, Biden, came out in very strong support of Israel and promised to help in any way that it could, and it does send a lot of military aid to Israel. But then the last few weeks, and particularly after that attack on humanitarian aid workers, the World Central Kitchen workers, the US has been less supportive of Israel, certainly in its words, and Biden has been warning Netanyahu against any further action that does impact civilians in Gaza. It's been saying that, it could impact US policy if Israel doesn't do a better job of making sure that civilians are better protected. So you can kind of read between the lines there and understand that Biden and Netanyahu have had some tense conversations already in the last few weeks. And in this phone call, the US is likely to push Israel to de-escalate the conflict, to de-escalate the situation even further, and to insist that it gets any kind of warnings if Israel is planning to move any further.
Well, we've seen that US House Majority Leader Steve Scalise said in a statement that the House will consider legislation supporting Israel next week. What kind of legislation would that be?
So members of Congress and members of the House have been debating for, weeks and months really, about foreign aid spending, and that includes aid for Israel. Way back last year, President Biden asked Congress to agree on aid for Ukraine and Israel and other places. And they still, at this point, we're now in April, haven't been able to agree on a final number or even push forward that bill to be voted on. But it looks like there might be a turning point here. It looks like this Iran attack on Israel might have essentially forced members of Congress to meet and discuss what it is they're going to do to contribute in terms of finances towards Israel to continue to help support them defend themselves, and also to decide how to act against Israel. You know, in the past, of course, there have been many US sanctions put against Iran, I should say, for many reasons. There's likely to be big discussion in Congress going forward about how the US should respond. But certainly it looks like this Iranian attack on Israel may be pushing the popular opinion in favor of supporting Israel again.